What up, man?
What's up, man? How's it going?
Chilling.
Chilling? What's on your mind?
Yeah. I'm an atheist, so
hmm
I disagree on the prompt.
Okay, cool. So tell you what, um, if you want, I can kind of briefly lay out my thinking here on why I say what's in the prompt, and then you can, poke and prod at it. Does that sound good?
Go for it.
Yeah, so I guess I should start by just kind of explaining what I take evidence to be. So I take evidence to be some type of data which raises the probability of a hypothesis. So if I have hypothesis A and hypothesis B, and this piece of data it's really probable under A, but it's not very probable under B, then I take that
Mhm.
piece of data as being evidence for A. And so I think
I have an issue
beauty.
with that first part, and
Okay,
it
what's
would
up?
be that logical claims, you have to structure them from the bottom up and not the top down. You have to follow the evidence where it leads and not fit evidence around claims, right?
So what I just described is a pretty generic kind of Bayesian account of evidence that's used. This type of evidential thinking is used in science, like I said, because kind of Bayesian approaches, or used in forensics, history, things like that. And so this another way of thinking about this. This is along similar lines. Is the idea of we have a set of facts, and then we try to find what's the best explanation for the facts. And so just part of that is how I just described it, as saying, okay, like what's probable under each hypothesis. And so I don't think I'm doing anything weird here. I mean, this is just a pretty standard approach to evidence.
Well, for me, a lot of it's like what you say. Okay, well, if God existed, what evidence would exist if God existed? And then you look for that evidence, and that's like a presupposing, right? It's the claim.
No, so no, so we're just taking all the data that we have before us and we're saying what best accounts for this. So if I have a bunch of data that is really improbable in the absence of God's existence, and then I have a bunch of data which is really probable in the presence of God's existence, that's just that's just what that's just what evidence is. So let me give an example. Suppose that I walk into a crime scene and I see there's like a woman laying on the ground, and there's like a knife in her back, and there's signs of a struggle, and there's a broken window, and like muddy footprints and stuff like that. I walk in, and what do I conclude from this? Well, I conclude there was probably a crime, right? I won't say which one because TikTok's really
Yeah.
weird. But it's just like, okay, there's clearly been a crime here, and there's been a person who committed this crime. Well, why do I infer that? Because I know that if there was no criminal, it sure is unlikely that all of that data would be present. Like each piece of those data is really improbable that that would come about in the absence of a criminal. But if there was a criminal, well then all that thing that I'm looking at, that is nowhere near as improbable. And so all of that data, when I do this type of probability assessment of each one of these, that data counts as evidence for the criminal hypothesis because of that evidential weighing that I just described.
Yeah. Well, in the situation of like, well, there is a crime and there's reason to believe that a crime has been committed, so it's
hmm
reasonable for there to be a criminal. That is already based around evidence that, like,
What
crimes have
evidence?
criminals and like our understanding of, you know, what happens or why that stuff happens, right? That's built on like pre-founded evidence. Whereas you see like,
Okay,
oh,
but wait.
you
So
like,
let's pause there. So in this instance of the criminal situation, right? So
mhm.
you're granting that the data that I talked about, like the knife, the shoes, the things like that, you're noting that that does serve as evidence for the criminal, right?
The knife in the shoes.
Like there's a knife in the woman's back. There's maybe big muddy footprints near the window. The window's also broken. Like these are all pieces of evidence for there being a criminal who came in and did this to the woman. Like you agree that this does constitute evidence.
I mean, sure, yeah.
Okay, and the reason it constitutes evidence is all of those things are really unlikely in the absence of a criminal. Like that's how we think about this.
I maybe in that analogy, but when I think of like God, you say, well, there's certain evidence that makes him probable and certain that makes him not probable. I think that is a fundamental flaw in the way that you structure evidence in and of itself, because you're saying you're assuming God in the forefront as opposed to just saying, look at all the data, look at all the evidence. Is there a God? Is there not a God? and like the evidence will tell you that. It's not about, you know,
But wait, how does the evidence tell you that? Like evidence, like the knife on the woman's back doesn't speak and
well,
says, "Hey,
that's
look at me, I'm the
measurable,
knife in the
that's
back."
demonstrable. It's like, you know, and you can use the evidence reliably to demonstrate there was a crime and a criminal.
How? How? So what you do is you take all the data points and you postulate a hypothesis that seeks to explain all of the data. That's
Yeah, but
how
you have to
those
get the
pieces of
data first. You don't just say, well, there was probably a criminal, and now let's go look for the
No,
data.
that's not. I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Is when we take that data and we start to do this process of postulating, explanatory mechanisms for the data, we can kind of lay out on the table a variety of theories to explain the data. And then what we can do is we can do theory comparison to see which theory explains the data better.
See, that's true, but I don't feel like it works in a lot of other, you know, comparisons.
This is just a really generic standard account of evidence. I mean, I don't. If we can't get past this, and I don't say this to be mean, if we can't get past this, there's probably no reason to go forward in this conversation because this is just a really general account, like philosophical Bayesian
Well,
account of what evidence is.
I don't. I think if you say, well, beauty is evidence for God, and you go, well, why? You know, and you use like the creation creator or whatever it is, right? It's like, well, what is beauty? Well, beauty is attributed trait that humans give because of our own innate
Wait, wait, oh, wait,
disposition
wait.
for
Let's can we
pattern
can
recognition.
wait? Can I
You know what I'm
pause you real
saying?
quick? Do you want to get into the argument for beauty? Because I haven't presented it yet. It seemed like you were because I was just as a preliminary remark trying to clarify what my understanding of evidence is, but it seemed like
Yeah,
you
yeah. See,
weren't.
I'll even I'll concede it. I don't like getting into much of the semantics and rhetoric of evidence. It's just me. Evidence is bottom up, not top down. And if we can work all the other arguments as such, it's all right.
Yeah. So I think the problem here though is like I'm down with this idea of we take all of the evidence and we use that to build up to a hypothesis. What I'm trying to recognize, or maybe get you to recognize, is once we have that evidence itself, we have to do this role
Yeah.
of coming up with explanations of the evidence. Like we have to construct from that foundation up to the hypothesis. And then once we do, but here's the thing, anytime you have evidence and you say, here's a hypothesis, you can explain that evidence under a variety of different
Yeah.
hypotheses,
But I
right? You
just
can,
mean that you can only follow it as far as it leads, and then once you get to the extent that that evidence, you know, shows, you can't make any leaps as to explain further questions. So if I have evidence that leads me like 60% to God, but no further, like you can't just say, well, it's probable there's God, whereas there's not.
but that, I sure I can. If I have evidence that shows that it's 60% likely that God
But
exists,
that's not a
then
reasonable belief, right? You have to
if
follow
it's,
the evidence as
but
far
I
as
am
it
following
leads
the
and not
evidence.
take a jump.
That's reasonable belief. So if you say that this argument gets you to 60% likelihood of God, then that is by definition probably the case that God exists. That's what it said. It means to say that something is probable. Like it tips over that point. So if I say there's a 60% chance
Well,
of it
60,
raining
60
tomorrow
is
and a
bad, yeah.
40%,
60,
yeah.
yeah. But I just mean like when you say you follow the evidence and then it's our duty to make hypotheses and claims to explain things with what we have. I kind of disagree. I think it's our duty to understand what we can understand as far as we can, and if it only leads us so far, then we just suspend judgment on the unknown.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with, if we reach a point where we can't make any further inferences based on the data that we have, then we shouldn't make those further inferences. What I would just say is I don't think I'm going past the data that I have when I make inferences about God.
I'll concede with it. I'd rather just stay topical. I'm not good with the
That's
like
fine.
the yeah.
Yeah, so I'll give you a really brief kind of approach to what I'm thinking of here. It's about 4 or 5 premises. So one, I would note that the natural world is filled with beauty, and the beautiful things in the natural world have causes, and causes which have artistic intent and artistic skill those causes are more likely to produce beautiful effects than causes which don't have artistic intent and artistic skill. Now, theism affirms that the cause of the beautiful things in the natural world has artistic intent and artistic skill, while atheism denies artistic skill and artistic intent in the cause of the natural world. And so then it just follows that the beautiful objects that I see in the natural world are more likely to have occurred under theism than under atheism. And according to my understanding of evidence, because I have a piece of data which is more likely under theism than it is under atheism, well, then that constitutes evidence for theism.
I would say that, well, beauty in and of itself is simply an attribute humans give to an occurrence.
So
But
you don't think?
it's
So go ahead.
The
Go
way
ahead.
that we describe that occurrence has no bearing on the origin of it in
Do
and
you,
of itself.
can I ask you this? Do you deny that there are beautiful objects in the world? Like, have you ever never looked at a rose and been like, "Oh, that's beautiful"?
it's just subjective. But yeah,
Well, I disagree that it's subjective, and so maybe then we could talk about whether or not beauty is subjective or objective, and maybe that'll help us get to the bottom of things. So, yeah, so I noticed that this claim that beauty is subjective, this is something we hear a lot. Like we hear things like, beauty is in the eye of the holder or beholder or whatever. But as much as we hear this in our everyday society, I don't actually see many reasons for thinking it's true, and for at least many prominent thinkers in philosophical history have contended against that. And this isn't just a position that theists hold to, by the way. There are atheist philosophers who think that beauty is subjective. One of my professors when I was an undergrad was one such philosopher. So let me just give you a couple of reasons for thinking that beauty isn't entirely subjective. So imagine that Bob and Fred take a hike to the top of a mountain, which has a view of a valley down below, and it's like a valley filled with flowers, and the sun is starting to set, and everything is basked in a warm glow. Now, Bob turns to Fred and says, "Wow, isn't it beautiful up here?" To which Fred says, "Ugh, that view of the valley is horrible." Fred then walks over to a pile of feces that has maggots crawling in it, and he says sincerely, "Now this is beautiful." Fred starts taking out his phone to get a photo of the feces. He sets the photo as his wallpaper. He sends the picture to his mom, so on and so forth. Like in this scenario, it's just obvious to me that they are not equally valid responses. Like Bob's response is more accurate than Fred's. There's obviously something about the valley which merits Bob's response, which is not to be found in the feces. And I would point out that this conclusion that I'm coming to about there's something about the valley that merits a proper response, or it's something in the object. This is consistent with how we seem to use our words and how we act in our everyday language when it comes to beauty. We say things like, "the flower is beautiful," which seems to be a straightforward statement about the object compared to "the box is cubical," or "the building was 40 feet high." Not only that, but we say things like, "I really enjoyed that exhibit because the paintings were just so beautiful. You should go see it if you get the chance." The straightforward way of understanding the sentence is obvious. I enjoyed seeing the paintings, and the reason I enjoyed it is because the paintings have the property of being beautiful. And the reason I suggest you go to the exhibit is clearly because the beauty that I enjoyed, it's present in the object. And so if you go and you look at the object, well, then you can enjoy it too. If the beauty was not an aspect of the object that exists outside of my mind, there's no reason for me to suggest for you to go see it, because the thing that caused me to praise it is something that isn't accessible to you. So I'll just conclude here by noting that being an objectivist about beauty is therefore supported by my experience in thinking about the two men looking at the valley, and it's supported by how we use everyday language and how we act. So in light of that, I just don't see any reason to deny what my intuitions and my experiences make apparent to me, which is like, no, there's something really objective about beauty that we can get wrong or right.
well, I think that when you say that, you know, there's something more beautiful about the valley than the shit. It's, well, that's because of your experiences. It's because of your implicit and developed bias, right? There's nothing
No, I think there's
innate.
just something about that.
No, I know you think there's something
Yeah.
innate in the, occurrences and objects in and of themselves that is beautiful. But beauty is it is an attribute because it is an opinion we have on it, right?
But
I
that's
don't think you can
circular
make any
though. Why should I
argument.
think that's the case?
It's not why should you, it's either you do or you do not based on your experiences, right? So you can say like, why should I ask someone else to go look at it if I don't know whether or not they're going to be beautiful? And it's like, well, I'm relating to, a common experience and or, general understanding of beauty, but that does not mean that, general understandings are objective. But whereas, like, certain things are typically considered beautiful, but
So
typically
do you
not
think
objective.
so do you think that the man who looks at the feces-filled maggot and he says that's beautiful, you think he's equally right as the guy who looks at the sun-basked valley and says it's beautiful?
Yeah.
Man, hey, listen, if you really believe that, dude, then we're probably not going to be
If
able
you
to get
think about
anywhere
the
in this
reasons, and
argument
you're like,
because
okay, well,
that's just
why?
insane to me. Like, if somebody walks up to me and they say, I think the feces is beautiful, but the valley isn't, my response is, you don't need an argument, you need psychological help. Like, if somebody really said that to me, I'd be like, this person has clinical issues. Like, I think in
Well,
that scenario,
I
Fred
feel
has
like there could
clinical
even be
issues.
premises for it, right? And the premises in and of themselves are just based on your own subjective experience. So I could be like, well, if I'm an evolutionary genealogist or biologist, I'm like, I really appreciate the fertilization of nature and the very things that bring about its reimbursement and like the
Wait, wait.
reciprocating energy.
S-
So when I
Wait,
look at
so
shit, it symbolizes that to me, and like I find that beautiful. You know what I'm
Okay,
saying? That's
so but
totally
you
valid.
haven't given a reason for thinking that it's subjective. You've said that okay, I can create this as your position. Let me
Well,
ask
our
this.
simple disagreements is the evidence in and of itself.
But that doesn't mean the claim itself is subjective. The fact that people disagree about a proposition's truth doesn't mean that the proposition's truth value is subjective. People
But
disagree
it
about
does
all
mean
types
that
of
there is
things.
no innate feeling based upon what we are judging.
That doesn't follow. No, so it doesn't follow that if people disagree about something regarding an object. So let me give an example. There are people on this earth right now who sincerely think that the earth is flat. Like that is there's a property the earth has and it's not flat. And so they like I think you would agree the mere fact that they disagree about that doesn't mean that whether or not the earth is flat or round is subjective.
But you can't
Like
prove
the
beauty.
do I know?
You can't prove beauty. You can prove the Earth's flat around, right? It
Well,
has to
I
do
can't.
with
Whoa, wait.
interpretation over like things we
Wait,
attribute versus
wait,
like
let's
actual
pause
things.
there because you're switching your argument. So originally your argument was, I know it's subjective because people disagree about it, and then I pointed out, well, there's something here that people disagree about. Clearly, we don't think that's subjective. So
Well,
clearly,
I'll
that's
hold to
an
that, but it has
improper.
to do with the topic in which we disagree.
Well, it seems like then you're just picking and choosing whatever is gonna fit you. Because when you're attacking me, you're saying, well, if I have two people disagreeing about something, that means it's subjective. And then I point out, well, that seems like a problematic principle to consistently apply. Your response is to just say, oh, well, then I'm just gonna change it and I won't use that standard when I'm looking at the Earth. Whereas I'm gonna say, well, I mean, that sure is convenient, but let's create
Yeah,
a
but it's because
methodology in
different
which we can
claims
assess
have
things
different standards of
consistently.
evidence, right? You have to meet a different burden of proof and criteria
But
to
boy,
substantiate claims. And
but
when it comes to like, is this
no.
beautiful? Is this wrong? Is this right? Moral claims or beauty claims, those are purely based on experience and cannot be premised
Wait, wait,
on an
but all no,
empirical
wait,
level.
wait, but
And if it can't be
all.
premised on an
Wait,
empirical
wait,
level,
let's pause
it's
there. Let's
purely
pause
like,
there. Let's pause there. Okay, okay. All evidence that you're going to cite in favor of the Earth being round is going to be experiences. It's either going to be your experiences or it's going to be experiences of people who went into space or experiences of people who did measurements. No matter what we're talking about, all of our reasoning is going to be either something a priori, like some type of, just we can kind of sit here and think through it ourselves, logic it out, although even that I would say depends on experiences and intuitions and things like that, or it's going to depend on experiences. So if you think, when we're assessing the truth of something, if you're thinking that, well, if the evidence we use for that is opinion based, or excuse me, is experience based, then anytime it's experience based, mere disagreement is going to be enough to make it subjective. Then to be consistent, you would have to say that the Earth being round is a subjective statement, which is clearly not the case.
when it comes to empirical discussions versus like opinion based discussions, is the earth round or flat? Yeah, you use your senses to develop and, obtain evidence, but there is
But
measurable and
I do that
demonstrable
with the
premises.
roses.
Right, and I'm
I do
saying
that with the roses.
there is no measurable or demonstrable premises to prove whether or not something is beautiful or not.
But wait a second. Wait. So when it comes to let's say like the Earth being, let's take it even more simple. You think you have a phone in front of you, right? Now, the statement, there is a phone really in front of you, that's a statement that is either true or false. Like, that's not a subjective statement.
Right.
Now, you
Meaning
believe
cannot
that.
be true or false. It's
Okay, but
simply,
wait, we can get back to the. I disagree with that, and I've offered reasons for that. But we can get back to that in a second, because I think the issue here is your methodology is bad. The kind of epistemic framework you're using to assess claims is bad. So you've said. So we've agreed that you have this phone in front of you, and you believe that because of experiences. Now, you can say, well, I can measure the phone. Well, how are you going to measure that? How are you going to do that? You're going to be using more experiences. Those experiences are either going to come from you. Maybe you get out a scale and you weigh the phone. All of that
I
is
feel
coming
the
to
phone,
you
I see
through
the phone.
experiences. Do I know?
Well, I feel the phone, I see the phone. I
Those
know
are all
what the phone is.
experiences.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, sure.
Okay, so does that mean if somebody came along and said, hey, actually, no, your phone isn't there, that therefore your phone's existence is subjective?
Well, it has to do with, is the evidence demonstrable to third party, accessors, right?
Okay, so
And
let's
when
pause
it
there.
well, hold on.
So
hold
how
on,
do
hold on.
we? Yeah, go ahead.
When I'm saying that, like, is there a phone? Is there not a phone? Is the world round or flat? Well, I can demonstrate measurable, reliable evidence that you can access as a third party to prove that claim because
No,
of
wait, let's pause there.
discussion over empirical
No.
facts.
So let's back
So
it
when
up.
it
So you have
comes
a
to,
phone in
like,
front of me.
beauty,
Whoa, no, let's stop. Chill. Walk it back because there's a lot of claims going here. So when it comes to your phone, all you can do is you can bring another person in the room and you can say, hey, look at this thing too. What do you think about that? And so you can get other people to look at it and they can say, oh yeah, I see that phone too. But then what if you bring someone in there who says, well, no, I don't think there's a phone there?
well, that's not what I'm saying.
Like,
I'm talking about
no.
demonstrability to third
Okay,
parties.
but what do you mean demonstrability to a third party? I don't quite know what you mean by that. Because you cannot, if there is a person in that room who says, no, there's no phone there, well, then that's not demonstrably the case that phone was there. Like when it comes to whether or not you're justified in believing in that phone,
That's
you
just
can
incorrect.
appeal to a bunch of other people, but they're also just going to be stuff that you're taking in through your experiences and stuff they're taking in through their experiences.
Just because I have yet to demonstrate a literal fact or the existence of something to them doesn't mean that it is not demonstrable in and of itself.
So, okay, so what do you mean by demonstrable?
As in, just because they're in the other room and they say there's no phone and like they can't see it, I can still walk in there and show it. I'm able.
Okay, but
to
what if you
demonstrate.
do that and they deny there's a phone there?
Then they're irrational.
Okay, so let's stop there. So that's how I feel about people who look at the valley and look at the feces, right? I say they're irrational if they're going to deny that, just as the person who's going to deny the evidence of the phone. But what you have told me
You know
is
the
the mere fact, well, let me finish. The mere fact that people disagree about the feces in the valley, you have told me that makes it subjective. So if you're going to be consistent in your methodology, if you're going to be consistent in your criteria, by your own reasoning, you would have to say in that scenario in which you take a phone and you show it to another guy in the other room and he says, oh, I don't see anything. To be consistent, you would need to conclude that whether or not your phone exists is subjective.
No, man. When I say that there's a phone, there's real evidence that I can use to show this phone. When you say the valley
Okay,
is
but
beautiful,
what's the
you
real
have
evidence?
Literal no evidence.
No, what's
There's
the real
nothing you
evidence?
can do to prove something's beautiful.
What's
I can
the
prove
real
phones
evidence
exist.
of the phone? Okay, what's the real evidence of the phone?
It's measurable, demonstrable. I can throw it at his
All
face.
of that's
and it'll hurt it.
your experiences. I can measure the rows outside.
Okay,
I can put the rows in your
it's
face.
just irrelevant because everything we do in our whole lives is based on experience. It's how we, experience and the understanding of our senses is how we develop and, comprehend new information and, access.
Yeah, but here's what I'm saying
But when it
is I
comes,
can. You go
but
ahead.
there's a fundamental difference between communicating the existence of something actually in the universe versus communicating conceptual and philosophical opinions because they are not grounded in empirical fact.
But now you're just arguing in a circle because I think that the beauty
It's not,
is
it's not about I
empirical.
think, it's about can you prove. When it comes to
Okay,
empiricism, you
prove
can
what?
When it comes to
No, but you can't prove there's a phone in
conceptualism,
front of you
can't.
there. You cannot prove there's a phone in front of you. That's what I'm trying to get you to know.
No, I
All of
can't.
your. No, you can't. So right now, you cannot prove that there's a phone in there. All you can do is you can use your experiences, and you can maybe show this to other people. But then I'm going to say, well, how do you know other people are there? The only reason you can know other people are there is because you get them through your experiences as well. You cannot prove in the sense as show that this is 100% the case. You can provide evidence for. but we
That's
all
how we
have
do
to go.
literally everything, right? Like
No, we all
everything
have to
is based
rely
on
on our experiences.
existence, germs, Big Bang, evolution. That's all based on evidence, right? You don't know anything 100%.
Okay, no, wait, but you're not engaging with my
You
argument, man.
simply
Let's
have
keep
to
it simple.
acknowledge that in empiricism, we use measurable premises.
Okay,
to
but wait, how do
demonstrate
you
their
measure?
No, let me
You
finish.
measure through
Not
your
how do you measure,
experience.
not what is demonstrable, not what is any of that. It's when discussing philosophical arguments, there's an entire different structure as to there
No,
is
but that's
empiricism.
question begging
And
because you're
that
assuming this is separate. I don't think there's anything separate about me saying the valley is beautiful. I don't think the truth value of that is separate from you saying your phone exists. I think these are both statements in which their truth makers is something about something in the external world. And all of you
But if those are
have
the same,
done.
then you could just go up in court and be like, "Well, I'm the criminal, right?" You could be like, "Well, I didn't do it because I don't think I did it." Nobody knows anything ever under your fucking thing.
How does that follow from the statement that I just made about beauty?
Because you cannot know what is true if everything's based on an opinion, which is what you're talking about.
I never said that. I said we all use experiences when it comes to assessing
And I'm saying
evidence.
experiences are not accessible to third parties and are not reasonable premises to empirical claims, but they are
So,
to conceptual and philosophical claims.
okay, but wait a second. Experiences, so someone can't directly use my experience, but if you're trying to assess whether or not the phone in front of you exists, well then, okay, then you can't appeal to other people because any data you get
I'm
from
not
them
appealing
is...
to them. I'm saying that I can reasonably demonstrate to them the existence of it. Whereas you
No,
cannot
wait, when
reasonably
you say
demonstrate
demonstrate,
the
wait.
existence of beauty.
Okay, wait, no. So I think I can. So just as you go into the other room and you say, here's a phone, I can go up to people and I can say, here's a rose. And when we do that, most people recognize the beauty in the natural world. Like most people aren't going to be like, oh yeah, that's a really beautiful rose.
Okay.
And so what you're
Can
doing is
you
you're
structure
assuming
the
your
existence of
premises.
beauty comparable to the existence of like the moon?
As in that it's objective? I think so. I think it's just as
Can you give me
objectively
just,
true
like,
that there...
so give me something you
What
think
now?
is beautiful, like the valley, right? And give me like
Yeah, I think that's valid.
you think you have an objective structured argument for the existence of beauty in and of itself.
No, so my reason for thinking that that's beautiful is my direct experience. Just like I think there's a desk in front of me because I can directly see it. I have direct experience of it.
Right. So your experience tells you one thing. My experience tells me another. What does that
Wait,
mean?
so let's pause there. So my experiences tell me one thing. Your experiences tell the other. Now,
You're saying that's the only thing we can use.
when it comes to whether or not there's beauty in the flower,
Right. That
I
is
mean,
like the definition of subjective.
no, that's not what. If that's the definition of subjective, then the Earth is subjectively round. Because people, no, listen. Because listen, other people look at the same evidence that you look at, and they come to the conclusion the Earth is flat. That doesn't mean they're right, but they can look. Two people can look at the same evidence, the same things that you say are evidence, and they can come to different conclusions. And whereas with beauty, you want to say, oh, if we look at the same evidence and we come to different conclusions, that means it's subjective. But then in everything else, you want to say if people look at the same thing and they come to different conclusions, then everyone who disagrees with me is just irrational. And what I'm saying is, pick your methodological framework. Because if you want to go with everyone who denies the obvious in my experiences is just being irrational, cool, I'm going to use that response with beauty. Or if you want to go with, okay, listen, just because people disagree about, our interpretations of our experiences when it comes to the evidence about, the flatness of the earth, that doesn't mean it's subjective. I'm going to say, cool, I'm using that same thing with beauty. You cannot construct an epistemology, a framework, in which you can say the beauty is subjective, but also affirm that something like the Earth is objectively round, if it's all based on whether or not we just disagree about things.
But again, when it comes to discussing whether or not the Earth's round, the experiences that we use to premise our claims in an empirical discussion are accessible to third party.
Okay, wait, let's pause there.
But
So
listen,
the evidence.
when it comes to
I would
beauty,
say the
they're
same
not.
thing about beauty. No, I think
No,
everyone
no,
can
it's
look at the
not.
rose.
You
Okay,
can't
wait, can you
demonstrate to me your experiences as to why you
no.
think
Let's
it's right.
back up. So can you give me an example of one of the data points that you say is independently accessible to the third party in the case of the Earth being flat or round? Just pick one.
Independently accessible, as in like anybody can go and like look at this evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can walk in a straight line.
Okay, cool. So you're saying someone could do that, right? So someone could say they could walk in a straight line. So if somebody walks in a straight line for a while, and then they say, okay, it doesn't seem round to me. Well, okay, now what? Now that seems an instance in which someone apparently used the standard that you set up, and they're not coming to the same
Right.
conclusion as
But
you.
when it
So now
comes to,
what?
well, I'm in a place and I want to walk straight for, let's say it takes, the round earther says, well, scientifically, if you walk in a straight line for this amount of time, you'll end up in this place again. And you walk for that time, and you end up in the place that is demonstrable evidence that it is round. And if you deny that, you are simply irrational. Right?
Okay, so let's pause there. So you say this is obvious the case. It seems obvious to you that if
Well, not
someone
it seems
denies
obvious,
this,
as in that is how logic works.
well, prove that. Prove it, because that's your whole thing. Is what I'm trying to get you to see is even when you think you have what is demonstrable, provable, all of that is still you referring to your experiences of the world and other people's experiences of the world and this type of engagement between your experience and their experience. And what I'm trying to get you to recognize is just how you say, well, like, listen, if a guy walks for a while and he ends up at this place and he doesn't see how that concludes that the earth is, round, well, then he's just irrational. And so that's an aspect of your argument, right? You're saying this is one of this is
to that.
no, there's nothing illogical about and you may think it's irrational, but there's nothing contradicting a law of logic there. And even so, when you're doing that, what you're doing is you're appealing to your intuitions and your experiences about what is rational, what is logical, what is simple, like so on and so forth. So you're still appealing to your experiences, and you're saying, okay, this guy, he doesn't share these experiences, therefore, he's irrational. I'm doing the same thing.
Then I think I have a different way. What if we have the same experiences and different conclusion as to whether or not something is beautiful?
I would say one of us could be right and one of us could be wrong. Just as there are people who look at the same data.
Then, bro.
Okay, well then there's no objectivity to the earth because there are people who look at the exact same data about the flatness of the earth.
We could be living in the Matrix right now, dog. You don't know anything 100%. It has to do with evidence.
Okay, I'm fine with saying we don't know anything 100%. I'm fine with that. What I'm making the claim is that evidence raises the probability of God as a hypothesis.
And I'm saying
I started this out by saying that I'm arguing probability. What raises the probability of a hypothesis?
right. And I started out by saying that that is a backwards logical process because you have to follow the evidence where it lies and not just say that this makes what I've already accepted as a claim.
That's
to be
not.
more probable.
You're fundamentally misunderstanding what I mean when I make that statement. And at this point,
there's enough evidence for you to be like, God exists. There's no way.
I'm there. I'm there. I have that much evidence. No, I have that evidence. I have enough evidence to conclude that God exists. Like, I'm fine with saying that. And you haven't engaged with it. All you've told me is that beauty is actually subjective. It's merely subjective because people disagree with it. I've pointed out the problems with that. I've pointed out my experience, and most people's experiences is when they look at something beautiful, they're like, yeah, that's beautiful, and a rose is more beautiful than a feces. And I'm justified in going off that experience until you give me some reason to doubt that. And merely people disagreeing doesn't doubt that. And then I have to make a probabilistic inference of why I see these beautiful things in the world, why there are beautiful things in the world. And that data is more expected under theism than under atheism.
More expected under something you haven't proven versus the base.
No, this isn't about proven or unproven. This is I'm taking two theories. All right, this is circular. No, I've already just you're gone. I have explained this multiple times. This is basic, normal, everyday theory evaluation. That's all this is. This isn't me presuming anything. This isn't anything like that. I don't know what order people came up in the chat. I don't know if it starts from bottom or goes to the top. So I'm going to bring up Simon. What's up, Simon? What's up, Simon? Hello?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I just had some thoughts on that last conversation. I think a couple things that caught my attention was I think it's kind of, I don't think intentional, but a little bit disingenuous at worst, reductionist at best, to conflate these scenarios of evaluate these paintings as beautiful or not, or evaluate the earth as round or flat. I don't think you can compare the systematized explanations and network of reliable predictions of geometry and math
Can we pause there?
to
Yes.
the subjective experience of
War, I want to
the Mona
pause.
Lisa.
because I wasn't saying these things are exactly one for one. What I was doing is I was attacking a premise in his argument, and a premise of his argument was, if people disagree about something, then that means that the truth value is subjective. And what I was pointing out is, if you're consistent with that, then all these other things would have to be subjective as well. Now you can say, then you can get rid of that premise and say, okay, that's a bad premise. I admit that. Here's my other reasons for thinking that this is the case, but not that. But then you're adopting a different argument than what I was attacking.
I don't think you can that merely because people disagree about something, I don't think makes something subjective. I think I am inclined to agree with the last guest that yes, you absolutely can make a firm case that because someone disagreed that you are not holding a phone, or that you are holding a phone, they absolutely can be delusional. The disagreement in and of itself does not prove or disprove the subjectivity or objectivity of a thing.
Okay. So why should I think the natural world is the beauty I see in the natural world? Why should I think that's subjective? Because apparently it's not enough to just point out and say, hey, listen, this is people disagree about that. That's not enough. So then, what is the reason for why when I look at a rose and I look at feces, it seems obvious to me one of these things is more beautiful than the other. Why should I think that that's wrong if that's what my experiences indicate?
I don't think you should necessarily distrust your experience. You absolutely can believe that what you're feeling and what you're experiencing is beauty, but attributing that beauty to an innate, inherent quality of the thing, I think is the fallacy.
What my experiences indicate isn't just what I'm feeling is beautiful. I don't even know what that means. That's odd. My experiences is like, no, there's something about this object. Like, this object is beautiful. Like, that is the seeming that's going on here. Is there seems to be something about this object. And that's why I go to people and I'm like, oh, look at this really beautiful object. Look at this. It's because I recognize that there's something in that object or about that object that they also can perceive. It's outside of myself. And so why should I think that's seeming, which is it seems to be the case that this is an aspect of the object? Why should I doubt that?
And so I think you should doubt that because what you perceive doesn't necessarily have to always be attributable to an innate quality of the thing you are perceiving.
Okay, wait. So let's pause there then and unpack that. Can we unpack that?
No, I want to give substance to that because we can observe the exact same thing, and what you think you are observing is some outside of yourself quality of the thing, right? This, whatever it is, this beautiful thing that I am taking in that is a part of this thing, someone absolutely can observe the thing. You're doing the same process, you're observing, but what you're attributing as to be the beauty, someone could be a sign of trauma and horrible past events. To that person, there is something outside of them about this object that you are both perceiving. That is but you're not yourselves. That is not an innate quality of the thing. Okay, but wait.
Okay, so but that's the trauma is a response. You could say there's something about the object that reminds them of some trauma or whatever, but I don't think that you've actually given me a reason for why I should not. So it seemed like at first you were suggesting that I shouldn't trust my experiences with the object, and it seemed like the suggestion you were making for why I shouldn't trust my experience with the object is that my experience from the object might be from something else. Like you moved on. I tried to stop you and you moved on. Can we go back then to that first section that you said of why should I not think my experiences, which is, it seems to me the case that this is beautiful, and objectively so. Why should I not go with what seems to me to be the case there?
Because there's a very subtle shift in what you're doing when you're saying, I, myself, personally am experiencing something, therefore the shift is happening. This must now be a truth value statement for everyone.
Oh, wait, let's pause there. Okay, let's pause
The
there. So,
reality,
let's
not
pause there.
that I'm just
No, let's pause there. Let's
perceiving,
pause.
but that
Okay,
can be
let's pause. No, let's pause.
predictably
Stop. If you
shown to
stop,
other
I'm gonna
people.
disconnect you if you don't stop there. Because like, if you say something, I'm like, okay, that's a good. Like, we need to barrel down on that. I want to barrel down on that point because sometimes you start to build things on top of that point, which are fallacious. If it seems to me to be the case that something is the case, like if it seems that X is the case, I'm justified in going with thinking that X is the case until somebody gives me a defeater. Would you agree with that?
Not necessarily.
Okay, well then here's the problem you're going to get into. So the position I just articulated is called phenomenological conservatism. And if you deny that, what you're going to do is you're just going to be in a skeptical scenario where you're not going to be able to be justified in believing essentially anything. Because let's say right now you think that there's a desk in front of you. Okay, well, like, why do you think that? Probably just because you directly experience it. You probably weren't even putting much thought into it until we started talking about it. You just had the experience that there's a desk in front of you, and then you believe that. Now, here's the thing: if I ask you, it's like if I say, okay, well, and actually, in order to believe that, you can't just go based off of what your experiences indicate. You actually often have to do all this other stuff. You're not going to be able to do that because anything you try to do to justify the existence of the chair or the desk in front of you, whatever you point to, whether or not it's, hey, I brought Bob in, he said something, I got a tape measure, I measured it, any of all that stuff, you're then appealing to other experiences where I'm just going to repeat the same question and then you're going to be in the same situation. So we have to, my position is, we have to adopt an epistemology which recognizes that if my experiences indicate that X is the case, I'm justified in believing that X is the case in the absence of any defeaters. And so what I'm saying is with the rows and the feces and stuff like that, sure does seem to me that the valley is beautiful and the feces is not. And it sure does seem to me that this isn't just something going on in my mind. There's something about these properties there. And so unless you can provide a defeater for that, I and all the theists like me are justified in going with our experiences, which indicate, no, there really is something about this here.
So there's a nuance of this like experimental thinking that I think is really missed out when you approach things purely from some like a priori heavy philosophical argument. The reason that I say not necessarily that I disagree with you on that past point is because if I believe that there is some wildly artistic chair that, I don't know, no one has ever conceived of or no one has ever witnessed in my past experience to be in front of me, I don't necessarily need someone to offer a defeater to begin questioning the experience that I'm having.
Wait, what's the experience you're having?
I don't need to be offered an external defeater that, no, this dragon-shaped chair that no one has ever seen in my region just suddenly appeared in my workplace office.
Well, I think we need to pump it. I don't think you understood phenomenological conservatism. Phenomenological conservatism.
Something without actually allowing me to give substance to my argument.
I'm interrupting you because
you said. I don't disagree with any of the explanation that you gave. I'm trying to explain the not necessarily to my answer.
Okay,
your explanation was that you are justified in trusting your experience in absence of a defeater. If that now this experience I'm having is now a testable method you embark on, I don't necessarily need to embark on that. Offer me defeaters so I can begin to question this. I can just start questioning it.
Oh, okay, so let's pause there.
Questioning whether the Iron Throne appeared at my job without any defeater arguments.
But there you were making sense, and then now I don't know what you're arguing about. So let's maybe go back 20 seconds of what you just said. So okay, I have the position, right, that it seems to me this is the case. Do you think it's irrational for me to infer God's existence based off of my experience with beauty?
Yes.
Okay, so then what you need to do to make the claim that this is irrational is you need to show that my experiences about beauty are false. Like what seems to me to be the case. Like if I think that there's a desk in front of me, and you come in and you say, well, actually, no, it's irrational for you to believe that. Well, I'm just going to touch the desk, look at the desk, and be like, it sure seems like it to me. What's your reason for denying this? And so I'm going to do the same thing to you with beauty. Why should I think what is obvious? It seems obvious to me that is the valley is more beautiful than the flowers. Why should I think that's wrong?
Because even when you reduce it to such a simple example, prove that this desk isn't here, there's a whole network of systematized observations that have proven reliable explainers and predictors of other phenomenon. I can lift up things with mass. That's not just my expert experience or other people's experience. That's hundreds and thousands of different people's experiences.
Boy, well, let's pause there. Let's pause there.
Statements about the shared reality we're trying to deduce.
Let's pause there, dude.
You're greatly
if you keep talking over me, if
experimentation.
you keep rambling when I try to cut you off, I'm going to disconnect you. Like, I want to have a good conversation with you. But there are times where you say stuff and I want to pause you, and if you just keep on talking, I'm going to let you go, okay? So here's the problem that I don't think all you said is like, oh, well, this thing is different because I can do all that. Even if I grant you all that, let's say, okay, great, cool, go for it. You still have not given me any reason for doubting my experiences with the beauty and the valley. You still haven't done that. But here's the thing, even in the things that you just gave me, those are all instances in which I have to trust my experiences. So you're telling me I can't trust my experience with the desk. And then you're saying, or you're saying in that scenario, right, with the desk, you're saying, well, you can trust your experience with the desk. The reason you can trust the experience with the desk is because all these other things, but all those other things, all these instances in which, I read about a person measuring the desk or throwing the desk off a building, or all those things, those are still coming to me from my experiences. So if my experiences are guilty until proven innocent, nothing you just described is going to help me. But again, I'm not asking you about the desk scenario. I'm asking you specifically, why should I think the flower is not actually beautiful, since that is what my experiences indicate? Engage directly with why I should not think that is the case.
Your sole individual experience has not been systematized in any
I don't care. So what? Most of your experiences in the world have not been systematized.
That's how I am engaging with your point.
No, but okay. So wait.
That's empiricist versus philosophy impasse.
Okay. So let me ask you: Is your claim that if an experience has not been systematized, for any experience that we have, if that experience has not been systematized, then I cannot just go off of that experience? Is that your premise?
I think the default should be skepticism, not thrusted forward in violations of Atheists.
No, dude, just answer the question. No. Answer the question I just asked you. Yes or no? Is that your premise? For any experience that I have, unless I can systematize that experience, right? Unless I can do that, then I'm not warranted in taking that experience at face value. Yes or no? Is that your position?
Lacking nuance, but yes.
Okay, well, here's the problem with that. Is you have a bunch of experiences which you cannot systematize. No one can systematize them because they're not accessible to me. You have experiences about memory. You have experiences of, well, it seems to me to be the case that I have this memory of doing X, doing Y, doing Z. You have experiences about what seems rational to you.
They can be subject to systematization.
Okay, can you describe what you mean by systematization?
Like input into a logical framework that exists.
But I can do that with, okay, well then I can do that with my beauty. Okay, but outside validation.
And fits within some sort of scientific hypothesis network of other observations.
Okay, so you're saying a lot of buzzwords. I don't think you're actually saying anything here, though. So when you say I can have this experience and I can fit it into a logical framework, I can fit my experience of the beauty of the rose into a logical framework. So that's clearly not the case.
One.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? I sincerely don't even understand what you're saying. I don't understand what you're arguing. You're saying a bunch of buzzwords of demonstrable, systematized, this, that. Because I don't think you're saying anything other than buzzwords. So like try to elaborate, like pick one aspect of that and try to bear down on that with me. So I have an experience, okay? I cannot trust the desk that is in front of me until it has been systematized, right?
Yes.
Okay, how do I systematize that? Give me an example.
So you can use prior experience, right?
Well, but wait, let's pause there. Prior experience, whatever you're referencing there, I can't use that unless I systematize that. So let's go down a level. How do I systematize that prior level experience?
I think we have to establish here, are we actually trying to make claims about a shared reality? Or are we just, like,
you're dodging a bit.
Philosophically,
yeah, you're dodging a bit. Yeah, you're starting to get the issue here, right? You're starting to get the issue. If all experiences are guilty until proven innocent, then all experiences are just guilty forever. Because you can't systematize anything if you have to doubt every point you're wanting to reference for a systematization.
I don't need to logically a priori validate the universe's existence and everything I know in and of itself to functionally have a conversation about claims about the world.
But wait, you just said you have to distrust. You have to distrust your experiences unless they can be systematized.
Your lone experience in question. One experience in question. Yes.
Okay, so one experience in question. Yes. Okay, so you have the experience there's a desk in front of you. So you have to doubt that. How are you gonna build that up?
I don't necessarily have to doubt that based on the systematization of other observations.
No, okay, so how do you these other observations? All these other observations are experiences that you're assuming are innocent.
We could all just be dreaming in vats right now. If we want to carry this to its logical conclusion that experience in and of itself cannot be trusted. But that you're saying that be humans on Earth and have a functional conversation about what seemingly shared reality we have, then I don't think there's a need to a priori justify what knowledge is and how we know it's real.
But this is your epistemic standard. This is what you set up, because I agree with you. I agree. I don't have to do this type of game. I think I can, take these things at face value. I think these things are prima facie justified. And because of that, I'm consistent in my methodology. And I say I'm prima facie justified as taking the rose as being actually beautiful. Whereas what you want to do is you want to come in and you say, well, no, that actually isn't. You're not prima facie justified at that because that can't be systematized. But then what I'm trying to get you to see, and you just keep not getting, is this accusation you're making about my experience with the rose. I can make that same accusation against every single experience you have, because any justification you offer for any experience, any way you try to systematize that, you're simply going to be appealing to other experiences. And so what I'm trying to get you to understand is, whereas I'm being consistent
in and of itself.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
It's not just this. This is where I think it's disingenuous, because it's not just the fact that one person is experiencing something that in and of itself makes it trustworthy or untrustworthy. It is the testing against the shared reality, because that is the whole premise.
Okay, wait. Let's pause there. Let's pause there.
Real.
Let's pause there. Nope. Let's pause there. Okay. First off, if I put the shared reality of the rose in front of the entire world, most of them are going to agree with me. Okay, there have been actually studies about this. There's actually pretty widespread agreement on things in the natural world being regarded beautiful across cultures. So if you want to go down that road, you're going to lose that on that road. But here's the thing. That standard you're trying to set up there, that assumes the reality. Whoa, let's pause. Nope, let's pause there. No. Whoa, let's pause there. If you try to go down that road, you're assuming an external reality. But according to your epistemology, you are not justified in assuming that there's an external reality, because you cannot systematize that. That's what you're not getting, man.
The shared external reality is the systematization.
Oh, wait, let's pause. You're assuming there's a shared external reality, which means you're assuming A, that there's a reality there, and B, there are others experiencing it. Okay, let's pause. How do you know there? Okay, let's pause. How do you know there are other people experiencing the same world that you do?
I don't.
You don't? Then apparently you can't systematize anything. You've just argued against yourself.
I can't disprove that I am or am not a brain in a vat. But
Well, then according to you,
this is
but then
where these
according to you
conversations
can't.
go off the totally disingenuous rails.
No, this is where you
can
get angry
claim-
because your
you can claim
epistemology
you're
is biting you in the
consistent.
butt.
You don't need to know whether or not you're a brain in a vat.
No, I think I do know I'm not a brain in a vat. Because my answer is simple. My answer is so simple, and I'm just trying to get you to recognize it. I can know I'm not a brain in a vat. How do I know I'm not a brain in a vat? It seems to me like I'm not a brain in a vat. And I'm justified in going with that experience since I don't have any defeater. Now, if I wake up in 5 minutes to Morpheus pulling me out of the Matrix and unhooking tubes for me, I'll have a defeater. But until that happens, I'm justified in going with my experiences. And that is the phenomenological conservatism, which I set up in the beginning. And until you admit that, until you concede, yep, experiences are justified in absence of a defeater, until you get that, what you can call it obnoxious or not, I'm going to continue to press you on this point, which is all of this stuff of, well, I can know this because I can systematize and it's demonstrable and share. I'm going to continue to press this sophish, the solipsism threat on you, because that is the threat that's facing you if you don't just admit we're prima facie justified in our experiences.
I think you're trying to justify your prima facie experience with a sleight of hand that your experience is now true of some predictive model about reality. That
I never said anything about a predictive model of reality. I said I'm justified in going with something if it seems to be the case.
And you might not.
I might not be right.
Plenty of scientists feel as though they are right, observe things.
Okay,
that
cool.
cause
Yeah.
people
Okay, cool. I
beliefs.
might be wrong. Cool. Me might being wrong doesn't mean I have reasons to think I am wrong. That doesn't matter. So I recognize I might be wrong about my experiences, but until there's until there's actually a reason for me to think I am wrong, that's just the mere possibility of me being wrong isn't a reason to doubt it. So
All we are claiming is some experience that you can't actually communicate, right? I don't have access to your thoughts and emotions. If
Okay.
that's all we have, then anyone else's behind the wall of your not being able to know is just as equally valid.
I think other people's experiences are justified in the absence of a defeater as well. I'm consistent in my methodology.
And so when they cancel out, your experience cancels out their experience, what does that leave you?
Well, I still think I'm justified. I think just because someone's experience differs from me, that doesn't mean that I have a reason to undercut my justification there. And if I did think that, I would have to be, and you also would have to be a solipsist. We would have to say, well, I think there's a desk, but this random guy in a mental institution doesn't think it's there, so his experience cancels out my experience. No, I think I can just be like, okay, well, he can experience that, but my experiences indicate otherwise, so I'm justified in going with my experiences in the absence of a defeater, which he hasn't provided and which you have not provided.
The defeater is that you can't know what you're perceiving is actually an objective outside of yourself thing. You haven't.
Okay, so let's pause there. Let's pause there.
Let's
pause there. No, let's pause there. How do you know? Let's pause there. How do you know that the perception you have of the phone in front of you is actually an object outside of yourself and not really just something internal to you? How do you know that?
I don't know that.
So you're in a world right now where you don't think that you can even know there's a phone in front of you. Do you think you're justified in thinking there's a phone in front of you? Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Okay, so why are you justified in thinking there's a phone in front of you?
Because other people have held.
Well, let's pause there, because I'm going to ask you this again. Now I'm going to ask you. It seems to you to be the case. You have a perception of there are other people who say, oh yeah, I see in front of you. I'm going to repeat this whole problem back to you for each of these people you want to point to. Now I'm going to say, you think there's a person out there seeing the phone. How do you know that experience is not also just a perception in your mind, and that's not something that's actually in the world? How is that justified?
I don't know that I'm not dreaming or a brain in
No,
a
no, no.
vat.
I switched it to justified. Now we're talking about justification, okay? How are you justified? So you were trying to justify this object, this phone in front of you. You pointed to this guy. I said, okay, how are you justified in thinking that guy is actually a person external to you that's in the world that isn't just some figment of your mind? How are you justified in thinking that?
We can zoom out in the network of intricately corroborating observations to the nth degree that I cannot fathom them.
Let's pause there. Let's pause there. Whoa, let's pause there.
Support each
Observations that you're making? Observations that you're making?
Not in the sense that I am perceiving, but observations in the sense that there is a network of facts or truth claims that are attempting to corroborate each other.
Okay, so but what we're trying to get out here is whether there even is a network of things outside yourself, based under your epistemology.
Believing there is a network of observations outside of myself. Yes.
Okay, so you think that there are observers outside yourself. That's what I'm trying. I don't. We're going in circles because your own epistemology is undercutting you here, and you're just continually not getting it. And so I'm gonna have to get pointed to just like letting somebody else come up, because you're saying you think you're justified in X because of these observers, and I'm saying, how do you know that there's this observer? And you're saying, well, there's all these observers. And I'm saying that's circular. According to you, you are not justified in believing that, and in going with your experience of there being an observer there. You're not justified in going with that experience. And so, unless there's some reason to come in and justify that, like there's some external thing to just that experience to make them think that real. And so I'm saying, okay, do that. But then you're just appealing to other experiences of other observers. And I'm just going to repeat this same issue back to you on any external thing, anything you think is out in the world, any other people. I'm going to keep pressing this on you.
But here's the disingenuous part. You've sleight of handed twisted the argument again. We're not talking about whether or not I'm unjustified now. It's talking about whether or not I know that this is reliable.
Wait. So, but you said that you couldn't even know there's a phone in front of you, my dude. The whole chat can testify. You said you did not know there's a phone in front of you. So if you don't know that there's a phone in front of you,
manner that the phone is in front of me. No, I cannot.
But I wasn't asking you in a proven and logical manner. You told me you cannot even know there's a phone in front of you. So it seems bonkers that you're going to try to say, well, I can't know the beauties in the object or something like that, when you're sitting here telling me you don't even know there's a phone in front of you.
Now, here's the thing. What you were getting at with that question, please don't act like you don't.
I know what I'm getting at because I know what I'm getting at.
You would say, how would you know? If I said I didn't know, then there, I've scored some logically consistent philosophy bro points. No, I can't know. I can't know that I'm not dreaming. I can't know that I'm not a brain in a vat. I can't know that I'm actually sitting in a car. I can't know that I'm actually talking to anyone ever.
And that's why so first off, that's why I think your epistemology is bad, because I actually can know these things. So if we're comparing epistemologies, the fact that I can know I exist or know that there's a phone in front of me, which it seems like something we all recognize, like I'm going to put that like a dub on the board for me. And so right off the bat, I'm going to say the epistemology.
Whoa, yes. No, wait. The sleight of hand keeps going back and forth. Do you know, or are you justified?
Both, because I take knowledge to be something like justified true belief.
Right, and so when I split the hairs and say, no, I can't, am very well justified, it's the same thing.
Okay, but that's why I switched to using justification and instead of knowledge. I said, okay, let's set aside questions about does knowledge require certainty, all that. I was just saying, do you think you're rationally justified?
Everything I think I know fits within this network of observations that I'm justified in.
Okay, wait, let's pause there. So that's right there. You think there's this network of observations is something external to you, right?
That I am justified in believing, yes.
Okay, yeah. So you think there's an external observation network. I'm asking you, how are you justified in thinking there is this external observation network? All right, because this observation network that you think is external to you and you think is justifying all your beliefs, I'm asking you to how are you justified in thinking that external observation network exists?
I don't think it's within my power to dream up a reality this coherent?
No, just answer the question. You said you're justified in your
That is my
observations.
answer.
Oh, but
That is my
that's not a
answer. I
non-answer.
am
So why are you
in
justified?
believing that this is not a dream because I don't believe I am capable of dreaming it.
Okay, but that's not okay. So it seemed like before you were referencing something external to yourself, and you needed to reference this thing external to yourself in order to justify the experiences you're having. And now I'm asking you to justify that external thing. And what are you appealing to? What's he appealing to, everyone? He's appealing to his own internal experience of what seems like, well, it seems like I couldn't have possibly have dreamed this up. So now your justification for this external reality is your own experiences. How is that experience going to be justified? Where if you're going to be consistent, you're going to appeal to some type of this kind of external objective standpoint, or this objective network. So what you're doing is you're arguing in a circle. Why am I justified in this internal experience I have? Because there's this objective thing. How do I know there's this objective external framework? Well, because of this subjective, of this personal experience I have. You are consistently arguing in a circle.
Thing is, it's not personal though. Like all of
All right, we've been going long enough.
Experience.
I'm going to bring other people up. We can only go in circles so much. All right, I don't know who was. All right, I think this guy's been in the chat in the queue for a bit.
Hey,
Give me 1 second. You can talk and I'll listen. I'm going to turn my AC on real quick.
You're good. I'm at the pool right now, so I don't know if there's too much background noise or not. You let me know.
Oh, it's okay. Go for it.
Cool. Yeah, so I am, first off, I want to jump in and say that when it comes to being justified to believe your experiences, you're 100% justified. That's kind of a no-brainer. I think that you are absolutely justified. That doesn't make your experience truth. That just means that you're justified to believe it until you have a defeater, which is exactly what you said. That makes complete sense. You are justified. That doesn't make it right. That just means that that you're okay with running on that basis until otherwise defeated, right?
I agree with you, yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to this beauty situation, I want to make sure that we're first pointing out that beauty is not objective, it's subjective. Do we agree there?
No, I disagree with that.
Okay. So if two people see the same thing and one of them thinks that it is beautiful, the other one does not, then it's someone is correct and someone is incorrect. Is that the way you look at it?
Yeah, so let me give you an example. So this is an example, you may not have been here for it, of Bob and Fred, and they take a hike to the top of a mountain, and they get to the top, and there's this view of a flower-filled valley down below, and the sun is starting to set, and everything is basked in a warm glow, and Bob turns to Fred and says, "Wow, isn't it really beautiful up here?" And then Fred replies, "Oh, that view of the valley is horrible." Fred then walks over to a pile of feces that has maggots crawling in it and says sincerely, "Now this is beautiful." Fred starts taking out his phone to get a photo of the feces. He sets the photo as his wallpaper. He sends it to his mom, so on and so forth. I think it's insane to say both of these people are equally right. I think intuitively we all recognize both of these people, like they're not equally right. One of these guys is tracking more than the other.
So I've got to disagree there. So when you look at the big thing is definitions, right? So the reason why we can say the Earth is round is because round has been defined, and then you can measure and show that the Earth is round. Well, when it comes to the definition of beauty, beauty is defined as something that is pleasing to a person, right? Well,
I wouldn't define beauty in that way. I think something is beautiful even if it doesn't please anyone. So I can imagine a world in which a beautiful rose, maybe everyone in that world is just so aesthetically perverted that they no longer look at roses and say those are beautiful. Instead, they look at piles of feces. And I'm gonna say even in that world, the rose is still beautiful. People are just mistaken.
So the entire population, if in this existence, in this universe, there's not a single person ever who has ever lived or ever will live that thinks that a rose is beautiful, is it still beautiful?
I think so, yeah.
Why? So why?
It just seems to me to be the case. And this seems to be how we talk about beauty in our everyday lives.
I would disagree with that. So a lot of times when we talk about beauty, go ahead.
Oh yeah, let me give an example. So in our everyday lives, we say things like the flower is beautiful.
Sure.
It seems to be similar to how we say like the box is cubical or the building is 40 feet high. And then we say things like, oh hey, look at this rose. It's really beautiful. I think you'll like it. Well, like if I didn't think the beauty was an aspect of a rose, why am I showing it to you?
Right.
Because yeah, you know what I mean? Like we it seems like we act like I like this item. Like I really like this play. Why did I like the play? Oh, it was really beautiful. That seems like I'm saying more than I like this play because I like this play. It seems like I'm saying I liked this play because there was this something about the play that it had this property of beauty. And I'm saying you should go see the play as well because you also can access that beauty that's in the play.
So I think here's where we differ is you're saying that it is a feature of the play that makes it beautiful, or a feature of the whatever subject is that we're looking at that makes it beautiful. But what it really is that the reason why you say you should see it because it's beautiful, it's really you're saying you should see it because I think you will find it beautiful as well.
But why would I think that they would find it beautiful as well if the beauty was something that's in my mind and not in the object? Apparently what makes me find it beautiful is not in the object, it's in my mind. So why would I recommend it to them and think they're going to have the same experience?
Well, no, it's what it is that there's a feature of it that you find beautiful and that you think that other people would also find beautiful, correct?
Yes, and I'm referring to that property as beauty. Like the thing that makes me say, oh wow, this is beautiful, like that's the property it has is beauty.
But what you're saying is that right. So what you're saying is that there's a specific property of it that is beauty, and it's not something that can be calculated. You can't say this has 47 units of beauty in it, correct?
Yeah.
You're just saying that it is or it isn't. It's pretty much now. Are there grades of beauty? Are there some things that are more beautiful than others?
I think so.
Okay. So, but you're saying that this thing has an ability or has some feature that is beauty that can't be quantified, but yet somehow you can have one thing that's more beautiful than another. How does that work?
Yeah, so I think I can have to say that it can't be quantified is just to say like I don't think it makes sense to talk about 47 units of beauty. So you might take a.
Well, can you explain why not? Why if you think that there's some things that have more of a beauty quality than another, but you can't quantify, like you can say there's 47 units of temperature, whether it's Fahrenheit or Celsius. You could say that there's 47 units of mass.
Yeah.
But why can't you say there's 47 units of beauty if some things?
Well, I mean, maybe you could. I don't know how to set up that measuring system, but it seems obvious to me that there are some things which are more beautiful from others. So, for instance,
Right.
there are some flowers that are outside of. There's a piece of grass or something that's outside my door. And I think that's maybe decently beautiful, but I
Sure.
think the roses that are a couple of feet over are more beautiful.
Right.
And whether or not the fact that I can't divide beauty up into these subsections seems really irrelevant to the fact that it seems really obvious one thing is more beautiful than the other.
Well, but it does make a difference. And it's not irrelevant in the fact that if you can't quantify it, but you can tell that there is a great gradual difference. And that difference for you isn't the same as it is for other people, right? Because other people.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Oh, so I wanted to make sure. So I don't want to interrupt your thought there. I think you were getting to
you're
this
fine.
thing I was
Yeah.
wondering.
What I'm trying to say is that if you know that there is a measurable difference between two objects, you can't quantify it, but you know that there's something there. However, you're saying that it is an objective trait of this object, then you should be able to specifically say this is what the beauty is, and this is how much of it there is to make sure that this one has more of it than another thing.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why I should have to do that. I just don't see any reason for that principle.
Well, not being able to do that is what makes it subjective. That's the whole. Sorry.
Well, no,
yeah, go ahead.
I don't think that's what. I don't think that's what subjectivity means. Yeah, I don't see any. Do you think Do you think morality is objective, or is subjectivist about morality as well?
No, I think morality is subjective.
Okay, so I won't go to that as an example then. Yeah, so I mean, I would say that it just seems like I can, if it's obvious to me, which it is, that some things are more beautiful than others,
Right.
then it seems to me I don't have to be able to kind of cut up beauty into these bite-sized bits and make it comparable to make it comparable to something like weight. I think maybe that's a problem here as well, is we can say that something is more accurate just because it more closely resembles reality. We don't have to be able to dissect it into these chunks like of an inch or a pound or something like that. I don't see any reason why I should adopt that.
Well, but again, when it comes to weight, say you have two things that are extremely similar in weight and mass. Let's say they've got extremely close mass, and on one scale, they read exactly even. Now, obviously, you can get a more accurate scale and be able to knock it down and say, well, look, this one actually ends up being 1/10 of a gram heavier with more mass than another one does. That's something that can be measured. You can actually specifically say, yes, this is heavier than that is, and I can demonstrate that through a scale.
Okay,
You can't do that on beauty. On beauty,
yeah, but so it seems like I don't have to, and I think that the criteria you're setting up is going to be circular, or it's going to be not circular and self-defeating, because you think what you're saying about beauty is more true than what I'm saying about beauty. But I don't think that we can.
If you're going to try to be able to say that one person is right and one person is wrong, you have to be able to pick which one's right and which one's wrong. You have to be able to measure it.
Well, I don't think I have to be able to measure it. I don't see any reason to think that that's the case. It seems to me whether or not one person is right and one person is wrong is about whether those propositions correlate to reality. And so in the instance of Bob, in the feces example, he's right because the proposition he's making about the valley is true, whereas the proposition that Fred is making about the feces is not true. And so whether or not I can cut up Bob's conception of beauty into beauty inches or whatever, that seems irrelevant to the fact that, well, I mean, there still is this property that it has that that the other thing doesn't.
Well, but it isn't that the valley guy was true and the feces guy was false. It's that you believe the valley guy to be true and that the feces guy was false. It's not that that doesn't make it true or false. Kind of like what we.
Well, it seems like it is. Like, I mean, but I'm just saying this is how it seems to me, and this is why I think I'm justified. And I think most people, like, unless they come to the table committed with, like, I'm a subjectivist about beauty and you can't give it up. I think if most people were really honest with themselves about their intuitions when it comes to this, they would recognize, like, it's just insane to say that the feces is equally as beautiful as the mountain, like that there's really nothing to distinguish between these things.
Well, but the big thing is when it comes to when you're looking at things that are on complete opposite sides of the spectrum. So when you're looking at, for example, a valley and feces.
Well, wait a second.
Go ahead.
A spectrum. If you say these things are on opposite sides of the spectrum, you're admitting that there is some type of objective standard here in which the valley is on one side and the feces on the other.
No, I'm saying on your spectrum. So you currently are saying that there's a difference in beauty. You're saying some things are more beautiful than others. Mm-hmm. So there's a spectrum that you believe in. You can't quantify that spectrum, but you believe there is a spectrum there.
Yeah.
So when you have two things that are on opposite sides of your spectrum, feces and the valley, that's what I'm trying to get. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you have
you don't think there is a spectrum?
No, I believe it's subjective. So it's the spectrum is individual. I don't believe the spectrum is something that goes on everybody.
Okay. So why?
So everyone has a spectrum, but where things fall on that spectrum is subjective.
Okay. So I guess I just don't really see any reason to think that the spectrum itself is subjective. I don't see any reason to think that my spectrum is subjective any more than I see reason to think that my experiences about the desk sitting in front of me are subjective.
Right, but if you have your spectrum of beauty, and on your spectrum of beauty you have flowers on the far beautiful side, and you have feces on the far ugly side, right? Mm-hmm. And then someone else has a very similar spectrum. Maybe they have flowers on one side and feces on the other, just like you do, but maybe next to flowers, maybe flowers aren't the end of their spectrum. Maybe they've got sunrises that's more beautiful than a flower, but it's darn close. They're right next to each other. And you, on the other side, have them flipped. You have flowers right next to sunrises, but flowers are more beautiful than sunrises are. That doesn't make the other person wrong, right?
But I could say, like, listen, I can admit that we have preferences. So one might consider things equally beautiful, but there are preferences, and so preferences, I think, are subjective. But I don't think the beauty itself is objective. So let me give an example. I've been to classical ballet performances, and I've been to, you could say, more contemporary dance performances.
Sure.
I find them both beautiful And it's not that I think the contemporary dance is more beautiful than the ballet.
Okay.
I just have a preference for the contemporary dance more so than the ballet.
Right.
And so we may have disagreements amongst people about, well, I prefer the beauty of the flower over the beauty of the sunset, or something like that. But I don't think that's an undercutter for thinking that there's actually a real like property that they exhibit.
But what does it take to say that something has a beauty feature? What is it like? How do you come up with the conclusion that one thing has a beauty feature and another thing does not? Because, for example, you could say the two dances that you just talked about, ballet and I don't remember what your other one was.
Contemporary dance.
Contemporary. There we go. Yeah. So you could say that they were both beautiful, but one you have a preference over the other on. But then maybe a whole auditorium full of people went and saw the same play, and none of them found it beautiful. So what is it that makes you correct and everybody else in that situation wrong?
Yeah, I would say it's the property of the object.
Right. So what's that
The
property?
object
That's what I'm
having
trying to get
beauty. It's just beauty. I don't have an exhaustive. Yeah, so there have been throughout philosophical thought, there have been attempts to kind of explain what makes something beautiful? Is it ratios? Is it harmony? Is it X, Y, Z? And I'm just leaving that untouched. Like I'm not gonna try to reduce the beauty to, well, it's like these type of ratios or whatever. I'm just content to say it's like, well, I don't know what it is that or even if there is something that beauty is boiled down to. Now, I could be kind of platonic about it, and I could say that the valley more closely, or the ballet or whatever, more closely resembles the standard of beauty, kind of the platonic form of beauty, and more closely resembles it or exhibits that. I could do something like that if I wanted to, but I don't know that I necessarily have to. I think I'm justified in saying, yeah, this is beautiful. Like this has a property which the other thing doesn't, and whether or not that property is contingent upon some other things, and whether or not I know what those other things are, I don't see why I should care whether or not I should be able to cash that out and give an exhaustive understanding of that.
Right, but to be able to put it onto somebody else who disagrees, that's where you have to have some sort of measurement.
Well, here's the thing: if someone
not,
disagrees,
wrong, and you have to be able to come up with a reason why one of you is wrong and the other one isn't, right? And if you can't measure it, then you can't come up with which one of you is really the one that's correct and which one of you is incorrect.
Yeah, but this problem arises anytime we have two people who are presented with the same stimuli, but interpret the stimuli in a different way. So there are people in this world right now who they don't think that the external world is real. Like it doesn't seem to them that the external world is real at all. And I'm like, well, okay, I don't share that experience, but it still seems to me like the external world is real, so I'm not just gonna throw that in the garbage. Right. And what I would say makes me right and them wrong is the fact that the external world exists. But at the end of the day, I can't prove that my experiences. I can't do anything to prove to the solipsist the validity of my experiences, because anything I do, they're going to be able to cash that out in a framework, or they can reject those experiences or whatever. Right. And so this just seems like a non-issue for me. Now you may say that you don't share those intuitions, you don't share those experiences, and that's fine. What I'm saying is, I'm not gonna say you have to hold to these experiences. I'm saying It seems to me to be the case that these things are really beautiful. And I've given kind of my reasons for why, and I'm saying based off that experience, here are things I can deduce about reality. And I think one of those things is I can infer is God and His existence and things like that.
Sure, but we're stepping a little bit further ahead than there, though. So
yeah, I know. I just want to kind of contextualize the big picture. And because here's the thing, it's fine if you want to say, I don't share your intuitions, but I don't think you're irrational in holding to this. Right. That's one thing, and that's fine if that's what you're saying. But there are some people, like the last guy, who's thinks that I'm inherently irrational for going with my belief in God based on the beauty, because he thinks there's something really problematic in me taking beauty to be objective.
Right. Well, and I don't disagree with you that you are not justified in believing in your experiences. I completely and 100% agree with that until you're met with a defeater. However, the one part I'm trying to emphasize is when it comes to belief versus truth. So you can believe for sure that there's a God because of that, but it doesn't. And we already know proof. You have to take some assumptions into play when it comes to proof. So, for example, you have to assume that the external world exists. If you can't do that, then no experience is actually real, and none of this even matters in the first place. We're going off on a completely different tangent. So you have to at least
Mhm.
make the assumption that the external world is real and beauty exists in the external world, right?
Yeah, and I would just say I think beauty exists in the external world for the same reason I think the external world exists, which is this, it just seems to be the case.
Right. And the big part is when it comes to the spectrum of beauty. So we can
Hmm.
agree that there is a spectrum of beauty, but that spectrum of beauty is, in my opinion, and I think this might be where we disagree, is
Hmm.
subjective. The things that you see as on the beauty side of the spectrum could be different than what I see on the beauty side of the spectrum. For example, when it comes to dance, I don't find dance beautiful in any way, shape, or form. I don't see anything about it that is beautiful. But you're saying that there is some inherent feature of it that is beautiful, and therefore I'm wrong. Whereas, but you can't actually put a finger on what that thing is. So if you were trying to go through and say, well, which one of us is right? One of us has to be right, and one of us has to be wrong on the dance being beautiful. So I say there is no feature of this that's beautiful. You say there is one, but you
Yeah.
can't put your finger on it. That's where the irrationality that people.
Well, no, but here's the problem. So if it gets down to the point where we're both saying like, well, my experience seems to indicate that this is beautiful, and you're saying, well, my experience indicates this isn't. Well, at that point, we just have differing intuitions, and all arguments, if we're disagreeing about something, all arguments depend upon intuitions, at least at some of their bedrock level. And so if we're having a discussion, the fact that this argument bedrocks on intuitions for me, this doesn't make it any difference than any other argument. Because whereas maybe another argument you think, well, like, okay, the intuition it bedrocks on is things about like non-contradiction or like A equals A, or what makes one theory more simpler than the other, or when can something be rationally inferred, like all these other things that you seem to think these are intuitive, I don't. That's still bottoming out at intuitions. And so what I'm just going to say is like, we can walk away and say our intuitions are different, but just the mere fact that you don't share my intuition about this doesn't somehow mean that like you can accuse me of being irrational.
No, but what the part that's irrational is the ability to, like, by saying somebody else is wrong, but you can't actually demonstrate that they are. So you.
Okay, but
Right.
wait, if you have someone who thinks that if you think all solipsists are wrong, right? Like I imagine so.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I said what?
You probably think all solipsists are wrong, like all people who deny the existence of the external world.
Yeah, I would. Well, so at this point, I would not. If we're, again, I have to build my reality based on the assumption that the external world is real. So if somebody else were to come out and say that the external world is not real, I'm not going to say that they're wrong. I'm going to say I don't agree. And at some point, we're going to be. I don't have a way of proving they're wrong, and they don't have a way of proving I'm wrong, because we have to have this conversation in the external world. If we had a way of having this conversation outside the external world, then we're going to be able to prove one person right or wrong.
Yeah, but the solipsist is going to say that it's question begging to say that this has to occur in the external world. But here's the thing: how you just responded with your how you just responded in dealing with the solipsist. That's no different than what I'm saying with my response to you, which is like, listen, it's to say that, oh, I can't be justified in going with my experiences because I can't give a reason, to say like why I'm right and you're wrong. This is just going to be the case with all of our experiences and intuitions at their
Well,
bedrock when we
but
disagree
that's
with
not
other
what I was
people.
saying. So what I was saying, I didn't say that you weren't justified in going with your experiences. You are justified
Okay.
in going with your experience. What I'm trying to say is that your experience doesn't, because you believe your experience doesn't make it true.
Oh, I
So
agree. Yeah, I just because I believe something doesn't make it true. I've
right,
never claimed that. But
right. But that's what
I'm
I'm
giving
saying.
my
So,
explanation, yeah, for
but
why
right
I
and
think God
wrong,
exists.
but right and wrong requires truth and untruth. So
Yeah,
so
I agree.
So for you to be able to say that somebody else is wrong when you aren't able to, even like in your belief, you may say, I believe that they're wrong, but that doesn't mean that they are factually wrong. That's just an opinion that you're holding. That's what makes it subjective, right?
Okay, but it's still objectively true or objectively false that they're wrong. Like either I'm wrong about objective beauty or you're wrong about objective beauty. And so there's an
But
objective truth about whether or not this is objective. And I think that there is objective beauty just because of my experiences in the world. And if you don't share that, that's fine. But I would still say that, like when I say like,
Well,
oh, I
to,
think someone's wrong, that's just a way of saying I believe they're wrong. Like those statements seem pretty synonymous to me.
but what you just said was that you believe that it's objective beauty, and if I disagree, then that's fine. But you didn't say that, like, if that's the case, then it's not objective. If you're allowed to have the stance that I am, or that something is objective, and someone else disagrees with that, I don't see that. Like, how does that?
Yeah, so when I say that's fine, it means like, listen, so like if I'm talking with someone, if I'm talking with someone who's a solipsist and they were just dead set on denying the existence of the external world,
Right.
at the end of the day, my response to them is going to be like, all right, man, you can believe whatever you can believe whatever you want, that's fine. Like when I say that's fine, that's just like a kind of a colloquial way of saying like, I'm not going to sit here and try to fight you on that.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, like I'm just going to defer to my experiences. And if somebody wants to deny that the rose is more beautiful than the feces, I'm going to be like, all right, man, I think you're bonkers, but you do you. That's not my experiences, so I'm not going to base my beliefs off that.
Right. So you're not saying that's fine, as in it's acceptable. You're just saying it's fine as just you don't want to get into it.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying like because at the end of the day, like if I have experiences and you have separate experiences, and you know they're in direct contradiction, there's not a whole lot that either one of us can do when it comes to differing intuitions besides just like, because me, it's like I point at this, I'm like, this is obviously the case. Like I'm gonna point at the desk with a solipsist and be like, look, I can touch. Like it's just look. Like that's my evidence for why he's wrong. Is like look, right. And then if he just is like, yeah, well, I just don't share the intuition that this, that, or the other, right. Then I'm gonna be like, well, okay, I don't have anything else to refer to. You know what I mean? Like. Right. We all have this kind of like, we all have to hit this kind of bedrock epistemic point where we're just like, just look, like it's right there. Right. And then if people don't recognize it, I'm like, okay, well, like you not recognizing it isn't going to affect me recognizing it.
Right. But what you're doing is you're saying it's measurable. The desk is right here and it's measurable. But you can't do that with beauty. You can't look at beauty and say it's measurable. Cool. You can just say it exists. And that's why I'm trying to say that, that because of that, that's where pushing it onto somebody else fails. You can push it onto somebody else if it's measurable, but you can't push it onto somebody else if it's not.
But so when you say push it onto someone else, like I
say someone is right and someone is wrong.
Yeah, so I disagree with that. Like, I seems like I can say that somebody's right or wrong based on beauty, just based off of my experience. And again, when I'm doing that, I'm not in any different of a scenario than when I'm dealing with the solipsist. Because when it comes to the solipsist, like I can't do anything more than just point at the desk either. And you can say, well, you can measure it, but measuring it, that's no different than just pointing to the desk. Because now I'm just pointing to a tape measure they don't think is there. Now I'm just pointing to all this other stuff they don't think is there.
Right, because you have to start off first with the assumption of the external world existing. If you can't start off with that, then you can't have the conversation on beauty because beauty only exists within the external world.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is like the epistemic framework that you're setting up is one in which, if we were to follow it to its conclusion, would potentially lead us to denying the external world. Like you can't, we both agree the external world exists. Right. But when I try to give as an example the fact that hey, listen, if you're going to be consistent in this epistemic framework, it's also going to lead to you not having the epistemic, external world. You can't just be like, oh, well, I packaged that in, to start with. I'm going to say, like, no, this is where your epistemology leads you.
Well, no. So the way it would be is like when you're dealing with the external world, obviously you would just say, that we both exist. We both agree that the external world exists, and so we don't have to argue that point. And then we know that.
What I would do though is I would start to ask questions about why you think you're justified in thinking the external world exists. And there, I'm just going to go back to my phenomenological conservatism.
You mean if you were a denier?
No, I mean just in general. I'm just going to be like, why do we think the external world exists? Because of our experiences.
Right, and I didn't say that. I said that we have to start with the assumption that it does. So it's why. Because if you don't start with the assumption that the external world exists, then no experiences are real.
Well, I mean, the experiences would be real. They just don't necessarily correlate to something outside of the subject having them.
Correct. So so what I'm saying, I guess, in that part is that if you can't start off by saying the external world exists, then we can't start with the conclusion that you and I are even having a debate. We have to just say that this is just happening internally, and there is no you. You don't exist. Only I exist, and therefore this is just all something going on in my head.
Yeah, so we can't
But we're
both
beyond that.
recognize. Yeah, but I don't. The reason I don't think we're beyond that is because we both have to agree the external world exists
Right.
in order to have this dialogue.
Correct.
But what I'm trying to point out is that the objection that you're raising against me when it comes to me going with, the kind of the way I have to engage with someone who says this does, who disagrees with me by just pointing and being like, it's there, you either get it or you don't. And if you don't, okay, well, that's your problem. That's the same way we operate with things like the external world. If we were going to be trying to engage in that topic, or if we're going to be engaging with anything else, like we all reach that point.
You have to be honest, though, and realize that you can't engage with somebody when it comes to the external world debate. That's not doable. Like, you cannot prove it one way or the other. They can't either. You can.
But there's still a truth about it, right?
No, that's what I'm trying to get at.
But you don't think there's a truth about whether or not the external world exists?
No, that's an assumption that we have to make.
But there's a truth to it, right?
There's a truth. One of us could be right and one of us could be wrong, but you cannot say one of us is right and one of us is wrong.
Okay. But it seems like there is an objective truth to that, right?
Correct. There is an objective truth to it. There's just not one that's convincible that you're able to. You cannot sway someone's mind one way or the other. It's not possible.
Okay, well, I mean, I think you probably can, but let's just I can't force it upon someone. Let's put it that way. Like, I can't compel someone through debate to force that upon them. But we're recognizing there's an objective truth there,
right?
Even though at the end of the day, that's not something I can prove to you.
Correct. Now when I say
I'm saying the same thing about beauty. I'm saying there is an objective truth about this, and sure, I may not be able to prove it to you, but I can directly experience it.
But
I directly experience the external world.
But what I'm saying is there is an objective truth to the external world, but which one of us is right, you cannot say. You don't have a proof to it. You have to just
but so which one of us is right? Okay, I'm just saying I'm justified in believing the external world. Okay, so maybe this is the semantics that we're at this point. So I'm going to say, let me set this up differently and say, and see if you agree. It seems to me to be the case that there's beauty in the world, like that there's beauty, and it's not just merely an opinion and things along those lines. It seems to me to be that is the case. So I'm going to believe that is the case because that's what my experiences indicate. Mm-hmm. And then I am going to infer based on that experience, I'm going to infer things about the cause of the world that I think is around me. And all of this process, and then I'm going to conclude from that God exists, okay? And so I formed the belief that God exists based on my experience with how things beauty. It seems like I have not done anything irrational here. Would you agree with that?
I 100%
Okay, so with how okay, cool. I think we're arguing about semantics, about when we can say what. Because here's the thing, if you want to say that, that's fine. Because what I mean by that, I can't force. So there are things that seem intuitively obvious to me, and there are not just in this realm, but in other realms. So, for instance, me personally, I think something like an infinite regress of causes is bonkers. Now, there are other people who disagree with that, and philosophers have tried to, give arguments about, does this entail a contradiction, stuff like that. But a lot of these things come down to us just being like, well, yeah, that's absurd, so that can't be the case. And so if somebody says, well, I don't think it's absurd, well, there's just in general, regardless of what we're arguing about, there's just not a whole lot I can do if we're at that bedrock level. And so when it comes to God, what I'm just saying is listen, if you don't share the intuition that I do about the feces and the rose, okay, I'm just explaining why I believe the way I do. And if people share my intuitions, then this is something they might find convincing. But if they don't share my intuitions about that, that's fine. Maybe we would need to go to another argument or something.
Yeah, but
does that seem reasonable?
But the big difference is just where I'm trying to come up with where I stand separate from you is in saying that because we see differently on beauty, one of us is right and one of us is wrong. And so that's the big part that I'm trying to zone in on. That's what I want to drill down on.
Okay, so then, but you think it's objectively true that beauty is not objective, right?
No, I think that beauty is subjective. So like I said,
okay, but okay. So there's a statement: beauty is subjective, right?
Right.
That sentence is either true or false. So you think that statement's true? I think it's false. But whether or not that statement is true or false, beauty is subjective. that statement itself could be subjectively true or objectively true. So you could say it's subjectively true that beauty is subjective, or you could say it's objectively true that beauty is subjective. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, that can only be objectively done. It can't be subjective. It has to be objectively true.
Yeah, I
Or
agree.
false.
And so where we disagree then is about the objectivity of beauty, and I'm just going with the objectivity of beauty because that's what my experiences seem to indicate.
Right, and so that's where I'm trying to say, like, for example, if you can't actually point out and say this is the beauty feature, here it is, you can see it right here. If you can't point at it and say you can see the beauty feature right here, then how can you push that onto somebody else? That's part. How can you say the other person is wrong because they don't see the thing that I can't point at?
Just based off my experience, it's just like all the other things that I mentioned. Like I'm going to say I think you're wrong because of my experience with the object.
Right now,
Like that's like it is as obvious to me that the rose is more beautiful than the feces as it is obvious that there's a table in front of me.
So,
and if someone says I don't share that, I'm gonna say okay, I think you're wrong, and we can disagree about that.
So I want to make sure that's two things I want to look at. So one of them is saying I'm wrong, and the other one is saying I disagree. So are those two separate things to you? Is there anything that's subjective?
You could say, I mean, I would say statements like, I don't know, like vanilla is the best flavor ice cream or something like that.
So the only part that's subjective is what you're saying. The only thing that when it comes to subjective is where it falls on the spectrum. Okay, so beauty is objective in the fact that it exists, but it is subjective in the fact of where something could fall on the beauty spectrum.
I don't even think I would go that far.
Okay, so
I think there are some things that are objectively more beautiful than others.
Okay, but they could still. There are some things that you could flip flop. So something, for example, a flower, a rose in a valley.
I'm listening.
And feces, they could. You would say objectively a rose is more beautiful than feces, but subjectively the valley itself might be more beautiful than the rose, or a sunrise might be subjectively more beautiful than a rose, or vice versa. Like everything doesn't have a defined spot on the spectrum.
I mean, it may be that there is defined spots on the spectrum, and we just disagree about them.
Okay, but do you believe that? Do you believe that everything, no matter what, has a defined spectrum?
I'm pretty non-committal on that point because they don't have to be. Like I'm really confident that there are some things that have certain spots on that spectrum, and whether or not every spot on, and whether or not everything directly has a spot on its spectrum, I just really don't care. Because at the end of the day, like I don't have to do that. Like I don't have to commit myself to all this.
Well, but you do if you're going to try to have the debate on subjective versus objective, right?
No, I don't. I'm just saying, like, listen, this seems obvious to me, and so I'm going with it.
Right, but again, if you had two things that are just, I mean, almost exactly as beautiful as each other. I mean, they are just super close. Are they exactly? Or is there maybe just one thing that's just a tiny bit more beautiful than the other?
Well, it seems like based on the way you just said it, you said they were almost as beautiful as each other. So then if the way you phrase it, I would say that entails they were really close on the spectrum, but not as much. Not the same.
Okay, but if you viewed it one way, you said one of them really close, just a hair more beautiful than the other, but then I viewed it the other way around. They're still both very, very beautiful things, but one of them I view as being just slightly more beautiful than the other, and you're the other way around. Is one of us wrong? Or
I think so. Yeah.
So you're saying they have defined spots on the spectrum, and your reality is the only way that it could be, and everyone else is wrong.
I think that we can. I mean, yeah, but that also like how you just phrased that, like that's how we all think about things. Like you think you have a way that you see reality, and you think the way that you see reality is the correct one, and the way everyone else sees reality is wrong.
No.
So like I'm not doing anything weird there by saying that. Like I recognize that I could be wrong about my beliefs about reality, but that doesn't change my fact that I believe those beliefs. Like I think they're the case.
Right, but that doesn't change when it comes to, like I said, where I go when it comes to that is if I say that flower A is more beautiful than flower B, and you say flower B is more beautiful than flower A, I don't say that you're wrong and I'm right. I say we disagree. but that doesn't mean that there was a truth in it somewhere. There wasn't.
But here's the thing. I could say that we're both wrong. So the options there for me as an objectivist is I could say one of us is right, one of us is wrong, or I could say we're equal and we're just disagreeing
Both
about
wrong.
preferences. We're both wrong. Maybe they're equal. And I just really, I don't care which one of those I commit myself to in this conversation, because whether or not I commit myself on a flower being objectively beautiful, more beautiful than a sunset, that isn't going to change my mind about knowing that a rose is objectively more beautiful than a pile of feces.
Correct, because those are on different ends of the spectrum. But what you are saying though is that when it comes to somebody being wrong, that there's like, or both of you could be wrong. You, like you said, maybe both you and or both the Valley guy and the feces guy, maybe they're both wrong. Now, in your mind, you're saying that's not. Are you saying that's not possible? That is.
That the what now? I'm sorry, I missed that
That
last
both
part.
the feces and the Valley person, they're both wrong.
I don't think they're both wrong. I think the Valley person is objectively correct.
Okay, so I think that's where the big difference comes then in this stance, and I think that's probably the hurdle that no one is going to be able to overcome. Is you have to be able to, for the rest of us, or at least those disagreeing with you on this stance, they're going to say that while beauty in definition exists, the spectrum, the things that are beautiful fall on the spectrum in different places for different people.
Well, so then it doesn't seem like you're saying beauty actually exists. You're saying it's all subjective.
Well, correct.
Like it's all, so it's not something actually out in the world. It's something that's in our minds.
It's not a feature, correct? It's something. So when you look up beauty is something that is, by definition. Give me a moment. I'm sorry. There we go. I had a phone call come through to find it.
You're good.
Beauty is, by definition, something that is pleasing, right?
Well, well, here's the thing. I think that you can look at something and say that's beautiful without enjoying it. I've had this experience. When my wife and I were traveling, we hit a bunch of national parks. I was so tired by the end of it. I knew that what I was looking at was beautiful. I was so darn tired I wasn't even really enjoying it anymore. So I think, but here's the thing. I can.
Beautiful to you, should you have been in a different circumstance?
It wasn't that it wasn't beautiful to me. It was beautiful to me. I just wasn't enjoying it. So you're trying to set up this connection between what is beautiful is what we enjoy to look at, but I can enjoy things and not think they're beautiful, and I can think they are beautiful and not enjoy them. I really don't enjoy going to ballet. I think it's beautiful. I just don't enjoy sitting through it. I sincerely think it's beautiful, and I can recognize the beauty of it. I just don't enjoy it, and so there's just this disconnect here. I recognize how I'm saying this is consistent with how we all talk. Because we say, I liked it. Why did I like it? Because it's beautiful. What you're saying is that ends up being, I liked it. Why did I like it? Because I like it. Like you're making these statements that we make about beauty redundant, whereas I'm preserving the meaning of our everyday statements.
Well, all it is I liked it. Why did you like it? Because it's beautiful. What you're doing is you're just turning a verb into an adjective. But it seems like I'm saying something meaningful there. Like when I say like, I liked this because it was beautiful, it seems like I'm conveying information to you. It seems like the last half of that sentence is conveying information. But you're saying it actually isn't conveying any new information. I'm saying, yeah, it just seems like our actions and how we act in the world sure do seem otherwise. I'm also going to let you have the last word on this because we've been talking for a few minutes. Yeah. I guess at this point, then my big issue is, and probably where maybe the next person wants to try to take off in is, then what's your definition of beautiful? Because I'm not, if you're not saying that it's something that's pleasing to you, then what is it?
I said I would let you have the last word, so if I answer that, I would be contradicting myself. Do you want me to answer it?
I don't mind you contradicting yourself. You're fine.
Oh, okay. If you're okay, because
No, you're good.
Usually I try to let people I talk with have the last word unless
you're good. Not a problem.
cut them off. So I don't want people to be like James. My name's James. Like he said he was going to have the last word, and then he didn't answer. So if you feel like
before you take off, I do want to point out I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I am just really interested in the way you think, and knowing this definition is just intriguing to me.
Yeah. So since you asked, I'll say this, and then if you want to have a final comment after this, you're welcome to go for that. I will always extend that. Yeah, so I don't have a firm definition of what beauty is. So it's like if you ask me to define yellow, it's like, well, all I can do to define yellow is point to it, and say, well, that's yellow or that's yellow. Like I don't think this is something that can be reducible into words. I don't think I need to be able to give a hard, fast, definition of this. There's a joke or a comment. I think it was in some court proceeding where I don't remember the exact. I don't know the exact way it came about or was phrased, but it was something like, I don't know what it's like. I don't know what porn is, but I know it when I see it, or something like that. It's like, yeah, I just have that thing with beauty. Like I can't give you a hard, fast set of definitions for what beauty is, but I know it when I see it. And I think most people do. And so I'll go ahead and let you have the last word now, unless you ask me another question. Yeah.
No, I would say that based off that, I would find it very difficult to be able to debate the point. Beauty is the evidence for God, but we can't define beauty, and that your definition of beauty might be different than the people you're talking to. It does, again, I still really enjoy the conversation, but it does make being able to debate the different stances a little bit more difficult without first being able to define the main premise of the statement to start off with.
Okay, cool. I'll let you have the last word there. I appreciate chatting with you, dude. I have enjoyed it.
Thank you. I'm glad you follow.
All right, man. Take care. All right, everybody like the chat. I'll see. We have a couple people who I know have been waiting in line. I think this guy is the one. I don't quite know how TikTok organizes the guest list when it does that. So I go in the order that I think people came in. Whoops, I don't think that guy I sent. Okay, he might be gone. I'm bringing up Apple user. We're going to bring him up. Everybody, as we're waiting for Apple user to come up, remember to tap your screen like the live. We're having conversations about beauty and God. It is objectively 1 billion degrees in my room right now. I tried turning on my AC, and I don't know. I'm a little scared that there's something wrong with it because it is not cooling down, and it's way too hot out there for this. So, okay, this guy is taking a little too long to connect, so I'm going to disconnect him. I'm sorry, Apple user. We're going to bring up the Hamarambi. I think I pronounced your name correctly, Hamarambi.
Hello.
What's up? What's up, man?
Hey.
What's on your mind, my friend?
Yeah, I'm wondering, what do you mean by beauty is the evidence for God? Do you mean like in the universe or?
Yeah, so what I mean by this is I think beauty in the natural world is evidence for God. So I'll kind of give you a quick spiel of what I mean by that, and you can poke and prod at me. I would say something like this. I take evidence just to be data which raises the probability of a hypothesis. So if I have a piece of data A, let's just call it A, and then I have two theories, X and Y, of how A came to be. If A is like really improbable under theory X, but is like really probable under theory Y, I would say that that's evidence for theory Y. And so I think just the beauty we see in the natural world is one of these such data points that is more likely under theism than under atheism. And so let me kind of explain my thought process there. I kind of would put it like this. It was like, okay, I look in the natural world, and it seems like the natural world is filled with beauty. I've got like flowers and daffodils and butterflies and waterfalls, things like that. They seem pretty beautiful, and it seems that these beautiful things were themselves caused. Like those beautiful things have causes that brought them about, and causes which have artistic intent and artistic skill are more likely to produce beautiful effects than causes which don't have artistic intent and artistic skill. Now, theism affirms that there's artistic skill and artistic intent behind the world, whereas atheism denies that. And so that just means that these beautiful objects that I'm seeing in the natural world, they're just more likely to have occurred under theism than under atheism, and so they constitute evidence.
Okay, I kind of get your point, but I think I can find some holes in it. Like, first, I think beauty is subjective. Like if you were raised in a world where someone said like waterfalls and butterflies weren't beautiful, it will go against your logic.
Well, let's pause there then and discuss that, because I don't think beauty is subjective. So I'll kind of give the slimmed down version of the thought experiment, because some of the people in the chat have probably heard it a couple times by this point. if two people go to the top of a mountain and they're looking down at this beautiful valley, it's like it's sunset and it's basking in a warm glow, and there's all these like daffodils and flowers and all of this, and one person looks at this and says, "Wow, this is really beautiful," and then the other person is like looking at a pile of feces that has maggots crawling in it, and they say, "Oh no, this is beautiful." Like it just seems obvious to me that these two people are they're not equal. Like one of these guys is more right than the other. And if you disagree with that and you think these two are both like equally valid in their statements, then we could probably just cut off the conversation at this point, because that just seems so obviously wrong with me. I don't think we're going to be able to build a foundation to work off of.
I mean, yeah, I kind of get you, but these are two very different things. Like poop, I get you. It smells like it's very different. You can't like compare like a beautiful sunset to little poop.
Boy, let's pause there. Well, let's pause there and notice what you just said, right? You just admitted that the sunset is beautiful. It seems like the fact that you're saying I can't compare these two seems like you also get like there's kind of this standard of beauty, and like the poop doesn't correspond to it, whereas the valley does. And so even in that objection, I think whether you realize it or not, you're recognizing like one of these things is objectively at one point on the spectrum and the other one isn't. And that's what I'm noting, is like there just seems to be something about these objects that merits a certain type of response. And the poop doesn't have that and the valley does.
Yeah, I think beauty exists, but I don't think it's evidence. Because
Okay,
let's
so
take an example.
okay, yeah, go ahead.
Let's say there's a tribe of people that live on a mountain and they see the beautiful sunset every day. It's gonna be normal to them. It's not gonna be. I don't think they're gonna think it as something very, very beautiful. It's gonna be normal for them. But if you
Well,
take
wait, can we pause? Because just because something is normal doesn't mean it's not beautiful. Like I live with my wife. I'm constantly like, "Girl, you're beautiful." Like her beauty strikes me every day. And like when I go about my my normal everyday life. So I used to live in a pretty decent neighborhood that I would walk around. And I would walk around and I would continually be struck by the beauty of the natural world. And I think this is a pretty normal phenomenon. So just because something is normal to us doesn't mean we're still not going to find it beautiful.
Okay, I get your point, but I'm still stuck on this point that people can think beauty. They can define it by different examples. Like some people may not find the sunset beautiful.
Okay, but I'm asking you, do you think the valley is more beautiful than the feces?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so and is that just your opinion, or do you think there's something really about the valley that's more beautiful than the feces?
I mean, I think there are different explanations for it.
I'm just asking you what you think. Like, do you think
Yeah.
one of those objects merits that response more than the other?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Okay, so then let's just talk about that then. So then there are these objects in the world that are beautiful, and we need to explain how did these beautiful objects come to be here, right? What caused those beautiful objects to exist? The thing that I would note is that artistic skill and artistic intent is more likely to produce beautiful objects than causes which don't have artistic skill and artistic beauty. So for instance, let me give an example. Suppose that I had a block of marble and a skilled sculptor walked up to it and he had the intent to make a beautiful statue, right? So he has the intent and he has the skill to do so. And then let's say I have another block of marble and a guy walks up to it and he's just going to start swinging. He's not walking up to it with the intent to make something beautiful. He's not skilled as a sculptor. He's either, I don't know, maybe he's angry and he's just taking out his frustration, or maybe I program a computer to just randomly, swing at the rock at different points. Which one of those two marbles do you think is more likely to come out beautiful?
Of course, the one with the skilled artist.
Okay, yeah. So that means if we have something that we recognize as beautiful, like the valley, right? Then that means that data is more probable under theism. Like that a theism, that object is more likely to have been produced under theism than under atheism, because theism says, yes, this beauty you see in the valley and the rose and all this stuff, there is artistic intent behind it. Whereas atheism says, no, there is no artistic intent there. So this is expected under theism, but not expected under atheism.
Okay, does this only cover like beauty, or is this tied to the fine-tuning argument?
I'm just using it like how I just presented it. I'm just going with beauty. I'm not going to pull in stuff at this point about fine-tuning in the natural world and things like that. I'm just going based off beauty.
Yeah, but can I bring up one point that is a
Yeah, go
little?
for it.
Um, I think there are beauties in this world. I can agree with that, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of imperfections too. Like
Mm-hmm.
some people might find, like, oh, a lot of people are saying like, oh, God created the sun. The earth is so close to the sun that we don't burn or we don't freeze
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But I think like um, uh, stuff like this, like the sun or whatever, they still have imperfections. Like some people say, oh, the sun is beautiful. It gives us life. It was made by God, but it also gives us cancer. I think there's a lot of imperfections in beautiful things and the things that are tied to the fine tuning argument.
Yeah, so I would just point out there is like, so let's say I say, okay, yeah, there are these things in the world that, have these negative consequences. It was like, okay, like that doesn't change the fact that they were beautiful and the best explanation for them is still this artistic intent with artistic skill. And I'd point out, at least from a Christian perspective, like the bad things that come about, these things come about because it's, in a sense, the beautiful image has been marred. Like creation is like a painting that has had mud slung on it. Like things is not how it's supposed to be. Like we're not supposed to be getting cancer and mosquito bites and stuff like that. This isn't what the artist intended.
But how did it get there then?
Well, yeah. So at least from a Christian perspective, we would say that the bad aspects of the world come about from sinful rebellion, both on the part of humans and on the part of spiritual beings, which some people would call angels. I would call more Elohim or gods or things like that.
Yeah, but I don't get why people in this generation should suffer because what, according to your faith, um, uh, older people did, or like people so many thousand years ago.
Yeah, so at that point, then I want to make clear, like we can have a conversation about, and I'm
Yeah,
just
this
letting
is
everybody
getting
know I have
a little.
15% on my battery life, so I'm gonna have to cut it short here soon. I just got the notification pop up a few seconds ago. So there's the question of under my religious tradition, why does God allow bad things? So this is the problem of evil and suffering, and we can get into that, and I'm usually happy to have that conversation. But however I answer that question isn't gonna change the fact that, as we've talked about, there's these beautiful things in the world, and it seems like an artist is the best explanation for those.
Yeah, I'm not gonna take up anyone's place. I want you to continue, but I'm gonna read into this because it sounds very interesting.
Okay, are you an atheist? Is that
Yeah,
your
I'm
background?
an atheist. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming up and having a chat. I'm actually probably going to let you be the last person I talk to because I've been live for about 2 hours and my phone is getting close to being dead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Yeah, man, thanks for coming up. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who's come up and chatted with me today. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. For the people who were requesting to come up but didn't get to come up, I'm sorry I didn't make it to you guys. Feel free to hop in next time. I've been doing lives along this. I've been doing lives about this topic pretty regularly, so you'll probably have another chance. So, anyways, yeah. Everybody have a great day. Take it easy. Go outside, smell some roses, things like that.